Hello, humans. Michael Herrick here with HIPAA for Humans, realistic cybersecurity advice for healthcare. In a recent webinar, we talked about how a risk assessment can help you set priorities for making improvements at your healthcare organization. If you missed that webinar, you can find it on our website. There's a recording there. Just go to matterform.com, click on resources, and you can find a link to that webinar and all of the free webinars that we've prepared for you. That webinar is called How to Conduct an Effective HIPAA Risk Assessment. So a few of you have reached out following up on that, asking, that's great advice. Let's have our risk assessment help us set priorities. How specifically do we do that? Well, let me just spend a couple of minutes talking about that here, how your risk assessment can set priorities for you. So I'm going to open up a Matterform risk assessment. Let's take a look at how we do it here at Matterform. First of all, it's just critically important that your risk assessment includes all of the concepts that HHS is looking for when they evaluate your risk assessment. Your risk assessment has to be talking about risks, about threats, and vulnerabilities. Those are the key concepts for any risk assessment. If your risk assessment is missing out on those, is not talking about those, you're not going to be able to set priorities. At Matterform, we see a risk assessment as really a storytelling exercise. If you take a look here, we're talking about social engineering in this particular section of the risk assessment, and we're just telling the story in simple business English. What could go wrong? Attackers may use psychological manipulation. You're just telling the story, painting the picture of what could happen. Using business English, avoiding technology babble, avoiding compliance jargon. We just want to tell the story of what could happen. Once you've identified risks, you can align your security controls to those risks. So these are some security controls that are aligned to that social engineering risk. These are security controls that can mitigate that risk. So once you've made that alignment of starting with risks and then looking at controls, you can determine the risk levels the way we talked about in the webinar by looking at likelihood, potential impact, and effectiveness of your existing controls. That's how you can set the risk levels. And then you can use those risk levels to start setting priorities for the controls that you want to implement at your organization. And as you're doing a risk assessment, you're going to see one other thing that's very interesting. You're going to identify a number of controls that apply to multiple risks. You will often find that a single control can mitigate more than a single risk. And that's a signal to you that that's a high value control that you're looking at, and you should probably prioritize that. At Matterform, what we do is we pull all of our control recommendations together into a chart that looks like this. So if you look at this chart, every row in that chart is a security control that we've recommended in the report. And then for each control, let's take a look at the second one there, number 2, require two-factor authentication. We indicate how many risks that single control can mitigate. So two-factor authentication tends to be a very valuable control. In this particular risk assessment, it can mitigate 3 critical risks plus a serious risk and a marginal risk. We do a little bit of math with those numbers and we come up with a benefit score over there on the right, a benefit score of 62. But you can't just consider the benefit. You also have to take into consideration the relative cost. So in the green column there, we go through and we make a really quick, really rough relative cost estimate, just 1 through 5, 1 being least costly, 5 the most. And it's not just financial cost, it's dollars, but it's also time and trouble and worry and complexity, everything that it's going to take to implement this control at the organization. With those 2 numbers, we can do a cost benefit score. We put the score there, we sort by that number, and that's what sets your initial priorities. Now, we're not saying that you have to do step 1 and then you do step 2 and then you do step 3, not at all. You still have to apply some business judgment and some creativity when you're implementing these priorities at your organization. But a process like this, a quantitative process like this, is really good at bringing things to the top of the list that tend to get overlooked because they seem so simple. But that's what I want you to focus on. Those are actually the controls you should focus on. The controls that are simple, the controls that are inexpensive, yet have a large impact at the organization. The controls that are going to make the biggest improvement to your security posture and your compliance posture. Those are the controls that you should focus on first. And that's what a risk assessment can tell you. If you need help with your risk assessment, reach out to us. We're here for you when the time is right. Here at Matterform, that's all we do: risk assessments for healthcare, for covered entities, and for HIPAA business associates. I'm Michael Herrick with HIPAA for Humans. Join me here each week for more free tips on cybersecurity and HIPAA compliance. And thanks for watching.